Game loaded.
Hi, folks. We're now live on Twitch. This is the Lessons Learned podcast with my co host, Chapomon, and myself, Lessons Learned. We are here to talk about a couple subjects at hand that happened this week, including the return of Casey Hudson to BioWare, Twitch having a little bit of a problem trying to integrate voice chat to its services, and of course, as the title of the podcast suggests, we're going to be talking about diversity in gaming. A big shout out to Laura K. Dale for, via Chapelmon, who basically said that should look at a video. It was a very interesting video. You should go to her YouTube channel, Laura K. Buzz, or Laura K. And check her out. She has a great video. Not right now, of course. You can do that later. About diversity and representation in video games. So let's start with the news, shall we? The Switch. I was going to say the Twitch, but in fact, it's the Switch. Has a bit of a problem in their hands. And Nintendo has tried to integrate a phone app in lieu of a integrated voice system to the system. That Switch, and you're like, why a phone app? Well, nobody knows why, except that they want to make this push for apps on their on mobile, or maybe they just wanted to do it on the cheap, or maybe they don't understand the internet yet.
Yeah, or they couldn't quite figure out how to integrate a Bluetooth headset to their Switch.
I think probably what we're going to see is some kind of a extension or adapter, which probably is going to be a bit of a problem in the sense that it's a peripheral, and it's like, well, this is stuff that it's already integrated in PlayStation 4, and you can get on your PC with software and stuff like that. So why should I spend more money on the cheaper console just to get that tiny bit of functionality?
Well, the thing is, when you're buying a Nintendo console, you're usually buying it for their exclusives, and give Nintendo credit that their exclusives tend to be very unique. And obviously, you never see any other any Mario properties on any other console, and they've barely even ventured into mobile gaming until recently.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, the peripheral you need to use in order to connect to the Switch is essentially an accessory that they wanted to bundle with the Splatoon 2 that sort of looks like a squid. You got to hook it up from your phone to your headset, and then I think you have to connect it to the console in some way.
Yeah, it's something like that. And I heard reports that mostly this information comes from the Know, as Rooster Teeth the Know, and it says that it's reported that when the phone goes on standby, the app goes off. If you switch to another function on your phone or try to have a multitask, the app will go down again. And also, it's especially if I suppose maybe they were trying to make it portable. So if you already have your Switch and you already have your phone, it's just a matter, the idea might be that wherever you are, you can probably connect it to. And a lot of people use also their mobile devices as internet providers on the go. So maybe they were shooting for that. But, you can hook up through your phone, voice, and internet so that you can download and play online wherever you are, and you already have your internet device with you.
Yeah, though I'm not entirely sure if a network could support over our cell phone networks like 4G, if those would be capable of supporting online play.
That's true. So
I'm looking at a picture right now. So it seems from the diagram, what the extra accessory does, it essentially connects the audio from the Switch itself, so you can listen to the audio through it through a headset, and essentially the other port goes to your phone so that it would function for the mic.
Hmm.
So essentially, you're connecting your. It's a splitter for your headset. One to your phone, one to your Switch. So that's just an extra accessory to carry around for a portable console.
Yeah. I suppose it doesn't really work. At least not in the current form.
No, and
No.
it just goes on to the pile of what was Nintendo thinking.
Yeah. Which is a very big pile with a very long history.
Although as of now, is there really that much on the Switch in terms of online gameplay? I
I
mean,
think Splatoon 2, I think, is a big game that they want. And ARMS. Those are
and
the
Rocket League, I believe
Rocket League,
the
yeah.
port.
It's there as well. And I think they promised that, what's the farming game? It's coming.
Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley is coming to to Switch. I keep mixing the two, and it's supposed to have online functionality that multiple players can be in one farm. I think. Although the last article I read that was earlier this year, and they said also that Stardew Valley would have that function first on PCs. So, who's to know? Certainly, we'll probably stream it once it goes into multiplayer. Just for the hell of it, because I love that little game. That game is so addictive.
I still haven't had a chance to play it myself.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm gonna pick it up. I pick it up on GOG, and I got it. And it's like, oh, I'm just gonna play with it, and then like 5 days later, I was still playing every chance I got. I was like, this is. I mean, I'm not really doing much of anything, but it's just, I just keep doing it, and it's a charming little game. I mean, I would recommend if you want a game that just allows you to sort of zone out and just enjoy it, pure enjoyment. I think it's a good game. And the graphics are great as well. It's very pixel night. N64. I don't know. It's before 3D, so it's more like Super NES style graphics, but of course updated slightly. The story's interesting. The characters that it has are charming. Yeah, it's a pretty good game. Pretty cheap too.
Yeah, that game kind of looks like something I would probably enjoy playing on my PlayStation Vita, but I don't think they ported it to it. And
No.
Unfortunately, Sony's disowned that amazing little console.
I haven't done portable console. I think the last portable machine that I had was the Jaguar, Atari Jaguar, back in the day.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I briefly had one, and it was pretty cool. It was one of the first that was actually a color version of it, but it was Atari, and Atari has been floundering, trying to get back to consoles for a long time, and every single time after Atari 2600, they just floundered. So it was a nice experiment while it lasted.
Yeah, but nah, unfortunately, I love the Vita so far. It's whenever I get a chance to play it on the go, it can hold its own. It's sad that it's unfortunate that Sony didn't market it correctly, because it could have been something like the Switch, or even the to an extent the Wii U. It's an extra peripheral.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the three. Also, that it was very difficult to compete with the 3DS. I mean, 3DS dominates the market even today. I mean, although Nintendo's moving away from the 3DS, trying to make the Switch both a home console as well as a portable machine. So we'll see if that succeeds.
Yeah.
That, and I don't think the Switch has the back buttons that the Vita has to caress the machine.
No, it doesn't have the rear touchpad, which as extra, when you have to use that as extra buttons, those are kind of iffy.
So moving on from hardware news, we go to software news, especially developer news. Casey Hudson, the director of the Mass Effect trilogy, which left BioWare shortly after the release of Mass Effect 3, and though he started to work on Andromeda, is now back with BioWare as the general manager of the Electronic Arts division of RPG and RPG games. So, if you know who Casey Hudson is, you might remember him for someone who was very passionate about the game. Very Canadian, because every other word that came out of his mouth was about. Apologies to our Canadian viewers. And also being linked intimately with the ending of Mass Effect 3. So, before I say anything more, Chapelmon, what are your thoughts on the news?
The particle sun returns. So to me, Casey Hudson's always been the face of Mass Effect in terms of a developer. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see him come back, especially after pretty much leaving his baby, which is now known as Mass Effect Andromeda, pretty much in the care of strangers.
And a strange studio as well.
Yeah,
mean, technically BioWare, but BioWare Montreal. So,
considering that, if I remember correctly, like seeing his resignation letter, it's always odd to think that here you have a studio who defended you after the Mass Effect 3 ending, a week or two before came out saying, we stand behind Casey Hudson no matter what projects he's going to put out and what directions he goes. And then like a week or two later, he resigns and says that he wants to pursue other interests outside of gaming, only to later, the last I heard, he was working for Microsoft HoloLens development, which I haven't heard anything since probably the other E3 last year or
2016 with Minecraft, I think, was the big thing about HoloLens, and then nothing.
Yeah, considering that there wasn't even a mention of it at this year's E3, I think that's might be a dead project at this point. So seeing as he's returned from that, could it be that he couldn't get a job anywhere else, or maybe this definitely BioWare is his passion?
I think the paycheck really is a fundamental issue. I mean, that's what he's done for many years. That's where his expertise lie. Pursuing something completely different outside of gaming, when the bulk of what you've done is game design, it's a bit tough, especially in this economy. And also, I think it goes back to the relationship between Electronic Arts and BioWare, right? I feel that part of the reason, I would say it's an even split of what happens after the release of Mass Effect 3. Part of the reason is I think Casey Hudson's ego was a big influence on it. Because he was, if you see in an interview, something like that, he's somebody who was very passionate, and it was sort of like his project, right? He is like Mass Effect. He always spoke with this authority. And as the game went back, he suffered a little bit of the Molyneux, and that he started promising more and more things, or hinting at things that would be there. I mean, he didn't go to the full extent of Molyneux promising entire games that never came to being, of course. They got that far.
There would be no ABC ending being his big one.
But he certainly, as the series became more and more successful, he promised more and more, and apparently at some level he delivered less and less. At some levels. On some others, actually, there were improvements. So, it's a split thing. The other hand, of course, is Electronic Arts. Publishers, I think their defense mechanism is never to admit that they have made mistakes or put any pressure on the developers or anything. They always go like, "Oh, we just published the games. We just put them out there, and pay for the game and pay everybody's salary and own the IP and own everybody in there and the studio and everything." But no, it's not us. It wasn't. No, we don't make mistakes. You might want to talk to the developer. They're the people who know about video games. They're let them defend themselves the best way they can. And I think part of it is that EA, I think, probably threw BioWare under the bus, and BioWare in turn threw Casey Hudson under the bus as well. Um, so it's a chain reaction, and now, to me, I don't know. I mean, I can see why Hudson took the job. You know, I'm not gonna condemn a man for taking a paycheck
Oh yeah.
unless it's an illegal activity, and even then, I will go like, well, it depends on what it is exactly.
Well, I always kind of thought that maybe there would have been a little bit of resentment, considering that he and what's his name, Mac Walters, were like pretty much the sole reason for the Mass Effect 3 ending, and pretty much why where a lot of the animosity with Mass Effect 3 came. So I always wondered if any of his coworkers had any resentment that their specific work kind of detracted from everyone else's, and maybe he might have been shoved out by his coworkers or had some, just from that resentment. But if he came back as a at a higher level, then probably not.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. I don't think that may have been again a decision by BioWare. I think it was from Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts cut back on Montreal significantly. Now they're going back to being what they were, but a DLC studio, and fired a lot of people. And it's Mass Effect is on hiatus, and now they're putting out a new sci-fi IP, and concentrating on Dragon Age, apparently Dragon Age 4 or whatever they're gonna call it, the Revengeance or something, and I think it's like, well, let's just bring somebody who we worked with before and has a credible track record. This might be one of those things where it's bringing the bucket brigade essentially. The ship is not only on fire, but it's also sinking slowly. The pumps are out. Let's bring the bucket brigade. Casey Hudson might be the one-man bucket brigade. Maybe he can save the situation. Maybe not. If he can sort of pull back and stay away from the cameras and concentrate on the game itself, that might be a good start.
Yeah, I'm not entirely too familiar with the person he's replacing, because they resigned. Essentially, they resigned and they hired Casey Hudson, but I don't know if it had anything to do with Mass Effect Andromeda's horrible launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's one of the things that seems a bad game can lead to a cascade of decisions, right? Corporate can panic, if the numbers are not big enough, and we talked about this before in the program, that corporations chasing bigger and bigger numbers means that every single project becomes ever more riskier, right? And the profit margins can become thinner and thinner, right? So if EA didn't get the returns they expected from Andromeda, then they went to panic mode and said, no, we have to fix this, fire people, hire new people, etc. And it seems like kind of the moving of the chair, so to speak, that we might expect. Again, there's no way to predict the future, partly because past performance is so mixed. I mean, I'm one of those people who were like, Casey Hudson, but at the same time, I gotta admit, the man has done good work in the past. So let's see what happens, right?
Yeah, I'm not. So exactly, what does a general manager do? It's just like, do they oversee every single project within the studio?
That's the thing about video game development, is that a lot of these titles are just, well, they're titles, right? A general manager in one place can be a CEO in another. It could be, director of operations, whatever, right? It's corporate structure. I'm guessing general manager, because BioWare is a wholly owned subsidiary of Electronic Arts, so they can't really have a CEO. I mean, technically they can, but they don't. Is basically the big boss, right? He's a person who has to corral everybody. And now BioWare is about 4 studios. At least I know 2 in Canada, and one in Texas, and I think they work with other studios as well from EA as well in West Eastern Europe and stuff like that. So the projects are getting bigger and more complex. And and EA still probably invested a lot of money still in the Frostbite engine, so that means that whatever is going to come out of BioWare, it's also going to use the Frostbite engine. So that's another headache to deal with.
Well, if it doesn't work out, he can always go brew beer with those two doctors that founded
BioWare. Yeah. Which is why reason why BioWare's name, well, BioWare. It originally was designed as a company to make medical equipment and software for medical equipment. But they got into games, and well, the rest of
is history.
Exactly. So, without further delay, now it's about quarter in the hour, past the hour. We're going to go to the meat of the podcast. Thanks to our friend Chapelmon and a friend of the podcast. I'd like to thank a friend of the podcast, which is Laura K. Dale. You can find her Laura K. Dale Buzz on Twitter and YouTube, and also as part of the Gene Inquisition podcast. I like to think that all members of the Inquisition podcast are friends of this podcast, but that's small name, big ego here talking. So let's go with that.
I don't know if your ego can be as big as Jim's.
Oh no, Jim, thank God for him, has a big heart. No, let's give him that. Come on.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, we're going to be talking about diversity in gaming, and we're going to be talking not only topics in gaming, but also movies, television, that sort of thing. But the focus should be on gaming. And since this idea was, and by the way, yes, I did watch the interview and other interviews before we begin. The idea came from our friend Chapelmon. I'll give you the floor to introduce the subject, shall we?
And so Laura K. Dale talked with Tanya DePress, I believe that's how you pronounce it, talking about how character creations don't just a lot of them aren't really representative of everybody in terms of diversity. Tanya's main issues was and a lot of character creators, you can't make people of larger sizes, or sometimes you can't make them as dark as she is, or have the certain hairstyles that usually come with being black, and it's just not just in a level of looking diverse, but a lot of times you have to make up a headcanon for your character. In terms of just because you make a dark character, say maybe if African American descent, the world's not going to look at you as an African American character. They're going to look at you as just a whatever character. Usually, none of your decisions in terms of what you make in the character creator is ever reflective in the game. And the ways I can kind of see something like that in terms of programming may be difficult, but and a lot of the examples she gave, like in say a fantasy game like Skyrim, there you have certain races. There are different types of races, and I believe a lot of that your choice and what race you go to does get brought up in terms of how NPCs might react to you when you're walking by. Like if, say, you're a what are the cat things called again?
Khajiit.
The Khajiit.
Khajiit have
a lot of them, yeah, they might kind of look at you with suspicion and just be like, Khajiits, you guys are all thieves. But at the same time, in fantasy games, I can kind of give them a pass for not being as representative in races in terms of what we in our world were perceived as diversity, because it's a fantasy world. Their definition of Black people or Hispanic people or Asian people doesn't exist in this world. I mean, you might have equivalents, but it's not exactly the same. But then if you say something like Mass Effect, where you could have something like that, you do see people of color in that game, but never is it brought up that Shepard is, say, a black person, or like my Shepard is a Hispanic person. Now, does anyone look at them different because they are a person of color? I don't know.
Mm.
I'd have to make up a headcanon.
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of the reasons why this is a difficult subject, because there's so many points. They start from the point of view of representation, physical representation, and how that may be seen in the game. Talking about Skyrim, there's a red guards. Red guards are canonically dark skin and from a desert people, so perhaps North African in origin. And they do get mentioned. But in Skyrim, if you look at the story, you have all these races, but every time you play an Elder Scrolls game, I think the only exception would probably be Elder Scrolls Online, because it has, different factions. There's always basically a canonical race. You should, that sort of fits best the story. And then you have other races. Like, you have the option, but if you play Skyrim, the story is really about the Nords, which are usually a light-skinned, Viking-inspired people, right? Northern European, Scandinavian type people. You can make a Nord a character that's sunburned, like has the darkest skin, whatever, but you're a Nord, right? And usually the choices of hair are blonde and blue-eyed, etc. There's a chance, of course, that people might choose. I, for one, almost never try to make a Hispanic character or a character change the presets, because I'm horrible at it. I tried that doing once. I was like, I want to make a black character in the original Mass Effect. Oh dear God in heaven, what kind of aberration? I mean, I was like, dude, I mean, if somebody came into the door and punched me in the face, I would say thank you and switch up the game. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. I lack artistic capability, and it was in a 360 controller, and there's a lot of excuses, but it was bad. Yeah, but I also understand where they're coming from, right? Because the thing about diversity and representation is we're so used to certain standards that they seem transparent. They're norm, right? The norm is that a character in Western developed game, for example, will be white, usually male, and usually heterosexual. And everything that is not that is supposed to be different, right? I would start from it's like, where are my Korean characters? Where are my Chinese characters? Where are my, my Hispanic characters, my Puerto Rican characters? I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, is that in media, when people talk about Puerto Ricans, it's one of two things. Well, three things. Either we're talking about Puerto Ricans within the American context, people who live in New York City, maybe second, third generation, people born to Puerto Rican parents, whether it's born in New York or born in Chicago or in the Eastern Corridor, etc. Usually working class or poor, usually a lot of slang, a lot of, criminal activity, hinting, of course, of drug abuse or drug use or drug sales, that sort of thing, which is part of a much larger set of North American-centric views of Latinos and people from the rest of the Americas. So there's that lens as well, and we get sort of shoved into that. Or second option is that the movie or book or whatever might go to Puerto Rico, but it's usually about the white characters, and Puerto Ricans are just at best in the background. And
the natives,
they're the natives, right? If Puerto Rico is mentioned at all, we could be, the island could be subbing for Colombia, for Mexico, for Argentina or something, because it's a convenient place to shoot, film. And finally, we're not even in the picture at all. Like, you can have characters, white characters or other characters, just walk through the streets of Old San Juan, which is the old the capital of the island, or in front of a beautiful beachfront, and you don't see any Puerto Ricans. It's as if the island were literally a virgin territory that hasn't been lived there for 500, 600 years, right? So looking at that way, it's like, okay, where are my people, right? Once in a while, I like to see someone like myself, right? It's not too much to ask. Also, incorporating those ideas I like to say of diversity from a writing point of view, is that it can make things, if done well, can make things very interesting. Because even if it's just a shade, a 1% different point of view. Like 99% of the things we agree on, but there's that one thing that we don't agree on. It could be whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be on racial, ethnic, gender, or sexuality lines. That can make a story interesting because, like, oh, I didn't consider that point of view.
Exactly. Uh, so in terms of like my background, I don't. Uh, I'm with you because I'm also of Hispanic descent. Most of my depictions tend to be either we're immigrants south of the border. We came here illegally to America, and we steal jobs from we undermine regular Americans
Yeah.
or criminal drug lord gangs, and or poverty. We got Jennifer Lopez working as a maid in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in terms of representation, it's one of those where I grew up with this '90s mentality. Race shouldn't matter, and I like to think that I grew up rather colorblind and honestly very naive as a kid. But even then, you still notice that a lot of people don't, a lot of characters and stories and TV shows don't look like you. And it would be fantastic to actually see someone that does sort of look like you up on the screen. I think of Marvel's, long list of superhero movies. I don't think we've had a Hispanic superhero in the cinematic universe. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of one.
No, not that I think so. No, we have a couple of black characters, and there's a new the movie that's coming out, which is Black Panther, which just looks amazing. All I've seen about that movie looks awesome. So more power to them, of course. And for people who don't know the history of Black Panther, it's like I heard some comments like, "Oh my God, it's being so political," dude. Literally, the name of the character was taken from a radical political party in the 1960s. And he has had episodes where Black Panther is literally fighting issues fighting the KKK. So, yeah, it's always been a political dimension. It's being aware of it. Also, I think
like in terms of like Marvel, I don't for the entire library of characters they have, there's no Hispanic characters yet. How many movies have they had? Or at least no Hispanic superheroes. They might have had a Hispanic character here or there, maybe.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. And in terms of that even kind of got me into looking at what kind of Hispanic superheroes are there? And I noticed that either Hispanic heroes or characters either tend to be villains, anti-heroes, or the few actual superheroes there are tend to have inherited their superhero identity, Green Lantern, The Question. You got a Miles Morales, as Spider-Man. They're all previously have been of a white person's superhero for persona.
Yeah, they borrowed the cape, or they got that cape handed to them.
Essentially, yeah. So it's how come we can't have any original Hispanic superheroes as well? And granted, I can't think of any Hispanic superheroes, maybe outside of El Santo.
There is I think one Marvel has a version of actually a superhero that was developed by a Puerto Rican writer called La Borinqueña, which is based on the flag. Well, actually, based on the not the flag, but it's based on the anthem of the island, the Commonwealth. And I think Marvel made a copy of that character. It's a female character. I haven't read a lot of it. I have to do the research, but it's still there. But yeah, and I don't think we talked about, for example, we touched on the idea of how we are seen and other groups are seen as well. And this goes into the cross section of what I would call normalization. Because if the only thing that I see, for example, let's talk about white folks. Let's talk about, say, heterosexual white folks. If I were Puerto Rican and the only thing that Hollywood showed me of heterosexual males in the United States was that they say they were pedophiles, Always leering around women and little kids and stuff like that. And it set the character to sort of looking at the little girl in the corner and stuff like that. And I knew nothing else about people in the United States, and I had no other information. It would be very hard for me to believe that the United States wasn't full of white, pasty pedophiles lusting over, little kids, right? It becomes the message. And the thing about it is, and I talked about this. For example, I made a critique of the character, black character in Mass Effect 2,
Jacob.
Jacob Taylor, and not himself, rather the story that was created around his background story. It's full of the parental abandonment, the father sort of going back into the jungle and sort of retreating and becoming this sort of potentially tin pot African dictator that took that murdered his own men, and abused them, and then essentially raped the female crew for over 10 years or nearly 10 years, right? There's all these horrific stories in Mass Effect, and you really scratch the surface. Of course, Jack comes to mind and all that, but that one ticks the boxes of, minority parents, especially African American father, abandoning their child divorce, when given a chance, reverting to a sort of animalistic or exploitative position, etc., etc. It's not reflected in and even Jacob. Jacob is sort of like an exemplar of his race, because he doesn't follow that. No, he's very straight laced and he's heroic and stuff like that, right? And he's the way he's supposed to present it compared to his father.
Yeah, and then you get to Mass Effect 3. Where if you romance if you romance him, he just up and leaves the first chance he gets.
Yeah, and then
which kind of plays into the stereotype of,
and then hooks up with someone else, and then becomes a baby dad in the middle of the war, right? Before getting married, so it's outside of marriage. So there's a lot of things, and the thing about it is, I would not accuse BioWare of doing this maliciously. I don't think they set up to say, we want to, tick these boxes because this is what we believe African Americans or black people in general are this and this and this. It's not that. It's a process of normalization. If what you've seen before and accepted as a given in society, especially through the media, video games, movies, television, and you emulate that, then you're more likely not to just follow the pattern. When you start writing and creating, you're going to take from the sources you already know. And the thing about normalization, and what makes normalization, the dark side of it, is that it can be very insidious, right? Because it becomes part of common sense. Oh, it's common sense that people of this ethnicity, race, religion, nation, etc., behave in this way. So why would I go against that, right? If I want to make a believable character, I have to write them that way, right? And you do it subconsciously. And so it becomes a cycle of reinforcement, right? I write a character that is from this background, is a criminal, because that's what I learned from other sources of media. And then my interpretation becomes part of the cycle, then reinforces other representations, right? And that, I think, becomes a problem. And I think, and going back to what Laura Kay was talking about in this video, and her co-host in that particular interview, I think one of the things is that, remarking on the fact that the hero of the video game is other than a white heterosexual male, it's a good start, because it says, other people can also be heroic. I can be heroic by being closer to me, right? I'm sure you're playing a role, of course, but that act of being seen as a hero, as being the center of the story, it's one of the things that can actually break this cycle normalization, right?
Yeah, especially one of the things they brought up is, well, why is a white male heterosexual always the default, and why is that always something that we default to? But as soon as we divert from that, everyone throws their hands up in the air and oh no, don't make me play as anything else but a white heterosexual male.
Yeah, that
And
the I
it's
can't relate argument, right? It's and it's again, and it's very interesting when the characters like that. It's like as a standard, it's like, well, I want someone to relate to. It's like, well, can you relate to the character? These are universal values. Like, no, that those are heteronormative, and I'm using big words, Chad, by the way, so bear with us. Um, and racial and normative things because you are accustomed to that, and in many cases caters to that. Part of my, you're probably looking at me on the screen right now. Yes, I am Puerto Rican, but I don't look whatever you might think a Puerto Rican looks like. We come in a lot of shades and colors, right? So one part of it is that if I do say a white male, I can identify with that, right? So I can sort of see the both sides of the issue in the sense like if you present a white male, even if the last name is in Polish or he's supposed to be an Irish American, whatever, well, it's a white male, right? And I'm a white male, so that's it. But on the ethnicity side, on the history side, on other sides, I go like, yeah, but that is incomplete, right? Characters don't have to be complete match to myself. Like I said, I'm horrible at creating my own face in anything, in character creator. But if if you think that other people shouldn't have a problem with the standard as it is, then you shouldn't have a problem if the standard changes. Because it should be about the character, right? It should be about the content of the character and how they're represented and the options given to you, right? And you can't, why is it that there's like, oh, and there's an argument like, well, it's about quality. There's an implication that if you change things, quality drops. It's like, why should the quality drop when it's related to someone other than a white male character, cis character? How? Can you run that by me? Because I don't get that kind of argument. Why is the implication that the quality of the work is going to suffer because you have a different type of character?
Yeah, and then you start getting into certain things like, well, maybe a lot of one of the things that was brought up is it because a lot of the developers themselves are just happen to just be white straight males. And maybe we need more diversity in gaming culture.
Yeah. Which brings us like, oh, diversity hires. You're just hiring people because you're trying to take some boxes. Like, what about giving people who have the talent the chance? And prove themselves. If they fail, everybody will know. But if they don't, I mean, we have thousands of games that just are trash and they fail all the time. So clearly, the people that are already making games can make great games, and they can also make horrible games. Changing up things behind the scenes just gives more people to succeed at or fail. Let the market decide, right? That's also the argument. Let the market. The market has already decided. Well, let's put more players on the market, so that the options of the market expand, and the market can decide on new options.
Exactly. And you also get into like the issue of when is a character's race kind of like important, and when it's it kind of just there. And I think that kind of like muddies it up, but I think it is important. It's like when, say, if you make a character Hispanic, when should the character just be a character, and when should the fact that this character is Hispanic be relevant to that person or that character's background in terms of how it relates to the story?
Well, I have two answers for that. I think you have to look at the kind of story you're writing, right? If it's a factor already in, saying, the setting, like, then would it be natural for this character to have a different opinion and see things different, or even comment on it if the setting is a factor of setting? For example, let's say, again, putting myself in the shoes of a Puerto Rican, I can only speak for my experience. I'm a 20 or something. There's a war going on, as it is a war in the United States. It's been waging for the last 16 years. I know, politics. Brace yourselves if you thought this was going to be a light podcast. And I joined the military, right? as a Puerto Rican, I can make at some point in the story, I can make a comment that maybe the interests of the United States and the interests of my home are not one on one. Or somebody might ask, like, what are you doing here if, clearly you're not an American. Puerto Rico wasn't attacked in 9/11. It's like, well, I could make the comment as a character that, well, I'm a citizen of the United States and I care about what happened in the United States, and I don't want to see evil go unpunished and stuff like that. I mean, it depends on the situation, it depends on the plot, it depends on the setting, right? It depends on the character as well. It's the interaction of those things. The second aspect of the second part of that answer I would give is something that a lot of my fellow female writers on my blog many years ago commented when I was tackling the question of how do I write a strong, quote unquote, strong female character. And it seemed, and I'm talking about half a dozen people that answered, maybe 2 dozen at most. So it's a small sample size. But the answer seemed to be make a whole or full character. Now, don't worry about making her, the female, strong for a given value of strong. Make her relatable, make her, three-dimensional. Give her depth, give her interest. Whether she's a hero or a villain or etc. Make a character that's interesting and engaging. I think the first thing we try to do is avoid erasure, which is, oh, these people don't exist. Talking about BioWare, that's one of the stories behind why KOTOR 2 was made by Obsidian and not BioWare, was that they introduced a lesbian relationship, lesbian, romance, in that a female main character could romance a female cat Jedi character that was there. I forgot the name of it. And back in a galaxy far, far away, when Lucas was the master of just Star Wars, he had a rule that there were no gay people, no LGBTQ people, nothing. Just everybody was straight as an arrow, would never deviate. They could destroy entire planets or save the galaxy multiple times. But, looking at someone else of the same gender and sex the same way in loving manner, that was way too much. Things have changed, both with BioWare and with the franchise, and now Disney of all people has it, and they're going like, yeah, we want to sell movies and books, so if this sells, why not? Why the hell not? But yeah, I mean, again, don't erase, don't ignore the fact that other people exist. Avoid pigeonholing people especially into harmful stereotypes. Only that. It's not that you can't have a gay villain, for example. I'm picking on my friend here, Chapelman.
Yeah, but don't.
But don't.
Yeah, but don't make them say
the villain. And that's it. Yeah, whatever stereotype, harmful stereotype they are. And
I don't know, make them a rapist or a pedophile or something.
Yeah. Or whatever is the negative stereotype that you want to assign. Yeah,
it just happens to have HIV.
Oh yeah, just because something happened in prison or something. Just the horrible things that you want to throw in there. Just don't pigeonhole them on negative stereotypes. And third, if they're an interesting and important character, make them interesting and important. There's something also that they said about, and one criticism that was brought in the podcast was that about diversity hiring and hiring people to be consultants. It's like, oh, you're going to this podcast and you talk about diversity so that companies can then hire you so that you can school them about diversity. It's like, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't I want to use someone else's experience to inform my own? I'm not
and compensate them for it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're gonna spend a couple hundred hours, training emails and discussions and meetings but yeah, sure, your time is worthless. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. We're gonna put you in the credits. That should be yeah.
Which I'm sure, like most people don't read.
And the thing is that even with consultants, and consultants have their own problems, and the business itself and the business models. Here's one thing, because another thing I heard is like, oh, I heard this a lot, and I'm gonna call you out. I'll call this people out. They're probably never gonna listen to this podcast, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The folks at the Co-optional podcast, particularly the host,
Hmm.
Total Biscuit,
Total Biscuit.
he has basically said this a couple of times, and I'm gonna tell them, and he's supposedly hearing this from developers. He has a much better line on the developers I've spoken to, which are a handful of developers, have never said this to me. So that's my personal experience. Well, of course, he has a much bigger platform. He's spoken to much bigger people. People have reached out to him and talked to the conversations. I'm not going to doubt that this is something that he has heard, and that the people who talk to him believe it to be true. Okay, I'm not doubting that. But it is what it is. I'm going to call it what it is. The excuse that developers are quote unquote scared of creating storylines and games with diverse characters and diversity in them, whatever flavor of diversity might be, it's just as an excuse. Let me tell you why. And I'm saying not so much to my co-host here, Chapman, to the audience here, and also on YouTube. And if Total Biscuit ever hears about it, I would love to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be online. I'm not gonna quote mine him for views or anything like that. That's just horrible. But I would say this: it is an excuse because you are going to make mistakes. It's as simple as that. If I go and I create a female character or a gay character, whatever, a trans character, I'm not any of those things, right? My experience is limited. I can ask, and people can give me opinions, and I can try to incorporate that, but still I'm going to make mistakes. It's a part of the ongoing conversation, right? The best thing to get over your fear is to actually make the mistake, face the fire. And I know in the internet people are horrible, and they're going to say horrible things, and people react very strongly, especially when you're talking about identity, because it feels like a personal attack. But you got to be able to weather that, because I think my argument on it is that diversity, again, is that 1%. It brings that kind of spice, right? Like, oh, maybe there's something you haven't considered. You tried it, and it can be interesting, right? There's another problem that I discussed before in my channel, and that is that would be the afternoon special effect. Afternoon school special effects, where you bring this one character against tied with tokenism, for example. It's like, you bring this one character, let's bring in the Hispanic character so we have to learn a lesson about drug use. It's like, yeah, I know what you're trying to do. It's, you mean well. And I would say about that is that intentions are important, but they're only half of the picture. You can, like I said earlier with normalization, we might not intend to do something wrong. Because I looking back at myself, I said things that I've been colorblind, stuff like that. It was just horrible. Just sound completely ignorant. I in fact intended the opposite. I intended to praise people. I intended to appear like I was being reasonable, and I was thinking, I want to be a good person. But I was taking a safe route, saying those things because I thought those were the safe things to say. I made the mistakes. Hopefully, I learned something from it. Hence the name of the channel, and I've done better. So it's okay. You're afraid. Fear is good. Face that fear and make the games. Probably gonna end up somewhere better, I'm sorry, I just ramble on this. So Chapman, I'll give you the floor for now.
So in terms of developers including diversity, like, I'm with you. It's like, I think it's well worth the risk of don't be afraid of doing it. I just did a let's play on a essentially an adult visual novel, and in it I kind of praised I praised the developer because there's a reference to a brand of canned foods called El Cheapo Chimpo. The shopkeep starts like just rambling on about how the lore about this character. It's like, oh yeah, it's Mexico. They find it all artsy. It's all artsy and stuff. They're cool with it. I'm like, I find stuff like that hilarious. Like it might sound offensive to some people, but I find it hilarious. Their previous game too had like a lot of Hispanic I guess like imagery. They had one of the things they had to do was make a flan, and they had like a condensed milk
Mm-hmm.
can of milk with like a sexy luchador on it with milk, I guess, all over him. It is an adult game. It I found that hilarious, and part of the romance for one of those characters is getting them a luchador outfit, and he goes crazy because it's something he's always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This actually, this is probably the only Puerto Rican character I can name. Is that particular character has to be a giant Puerto Rican demon who happened to be Catholic. He mentioned that in the first game that he was Catholic.
Wrestling, by the way, wrestling was in some quarter when I was growing up. Wrestling, the local wrestling scene was pretty big, and still kind of is. And also, there was a lot of connections with the wrestling scene in Argentina and in Mexico. So we used to watch those as well.
Yeah.
Later on, WWE sort of took over, and now that's sort of what people
yeah,
see. But,
I never like watched any wrestling, but I've always liked the idea of it and the just the imagery of the mask and stuff. So I enjoyed that. And I think in my stream, it's not really stream, it obviously because I have to censor a bunch of stuff. It's more of a recording. I mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, Hispanics, we all love Speedy Gonzalez. We don't know why people white knight us with Speedy Gonzalez. I miss Speedy Gonzalez. I enjoyed him as a kid. And my family enjoyed him. They didn't see what was wrong with him. Yeah. I guess in retrospect, it might have been racist, but I don't care.
I think.
And then again, I can't really speak for Mexico as a whole because I grew up I'm of Mexican descent, but I grew up in the United States. So, but it's things like that. I'm like, granted, it's a seedy porn game. Like they're willing to take risk, and I didn't bring it up on this recording of this game, but I'm seeing a lot of like maybe racial diversity or racial tensions in this particular game that I'm playing in terms of it's just going to really sound offensive, but you're playing as like anthropomorphic 8 people. Your main character is an 8 person. It seems like they were a military experiment, but the way they're being discriminated against, kind of just the hints of it. It sounds like it could be a stand-in for African American, and especially when you go with the racial slur of calling African American people monkeys, that they kind of tend to call each other monkeys too, which is like, you're kind of tiptoeing that line. Like, is this offensive? Is this intentional? I'm not. I don't know who the writer is as a person. So, but it's risky, and I kind of appreciate it.
I mean, that's not going to disappear. I don't think it's going to disappear. I think that when I said about going back to normalization, all that is when if Speedy Gonzalez was the only thing you knew about Mexican culture, that would be a real problem, right? It's like, but if you have other sources, like, well, it's okay. It's a funny cartoon animal that actually it's the hero of this. That's what I think. Is that Speedy Gonzalez is the hero of the picture. That's it's like, yeah, it might be, but it's still supposed to be a hero, right? It's also clearly a very much Hollywood version of what Mexico is supposed to look like. Like literally, someone was standing in the border in San Diego and looking over at Tijuana and going like, okay, that's all Mexico. I'm gonna go back to the Disney Studios and Disneyland and draw this or whatever, Warner Brothers or whatever, right? So that, I mean, yeah, you can understand what it comes from. And again, different people are gonna be affected in different ways, right? Like I said, some people jump at things that it's like, oh, I don't get it. Doesn't mean it isn't offensive necessarily, or that the criticism is not valuable, right? And although you should not take the risk to offend at times, right? But if you do get called out, I think more often than not, although the natural thing to do would be to defend yourself, unless people are just sort of rambling or like you're an a-hole or whatever. It's like, okay, you're not trying to discuss what I'm trying to do here. I mean, you're just angry for whatever reason. you have, logical or otherwise. Uh, when you get past your anger, then we can have a discussion. But you got to be willing to listen as well.
Yeah. And I mean, anyone who also, for anyone who may feel like they want diversity, don't ever give in to those gamers that might be like, oh, you're trying to force in like diversity and make me play as some queer homo black person woman. And oh, I'm sure people bring up everyone's favorite abbreviation SJWs.
Mm.
Just don't ever like be deterred by that.
Well, it's the same. I mean, there's the current game that I saw on stream here. I was watching before I went to. It's called it's a dating sim, and it's about hot daddies, right?
Yeah. Oh, I want to play that game.
The person that was playing it, and there were sometimes, because as a hetero guy, I still have the sort of remnants of I'm gonna call myself out on this homophobia, because you feel uncomfortable, and that's part of the phobia, right? You feel comfortable about something. Someone's like, that might be a bit too much for me. But at times it was just hilarious, right? That this, I think you can make either a female character or a male character. The game doesn't care, right? It's about dating the hot daddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was hilarious at times, and it was like, oh my god, this is funny, well written. The main character, as is written, is very endearing, like someone who sort of hesitates and is shy and whatever, and it's very caring about their daughter. And it's like, this is good stuff. It might not be for me. I have to get over my insecurities and my being uncomfortable. That's my issue. It's not the game's issue. It's not the audience's issue. It's not the people who are enjoying this game. The game wasn't made for me. Either I get over it or I don't. Simple as that. The world's not gonna wait for me to go like, oh, now you feel better about the fact that other people exist. Really? Are you grown up enough? Are we there yet? Come on.
Yeah, ultimately it comes down is that if the game's fun enough, people who have those criticisms will play it still. And if it's not to their liking, they don't have to buy it. No one's making them buy it. No one's making them play it.
Yeah. It's just, have it there. And I mean, also people will also tend to mod games to get their liking as well. I find that a little bit troubling, when you use
in the terms that we have to do it in order to get diversity. Yeah.
In one hand, but and we talk about this. Maybe this might be a second part of this book as we're coming down to the hour, about how you represent. Right, we talk about representation and diversity, but how you really go about it probably will be, and about modding and how people mod and fan fiction and all that. I think we talked about the preliminaries in this podcast, and we're, like I said, coming up to the hour. We might have to do another podcast maybe next week talking about how you really go about it and why people, when you mentioned, feel that they have to write fan fiction or do modding and all that to get what they want and need. And clearly the games are not giving them at some level. So clearly there's a market for it. And people are willing to put in the work to make the change. So, and also we're going to talk about James Bonding because that's just people like. So we're going to be talking about that next week here. As always, if you want to see Chapelmon, you can find him on YouTube as well as myself. And you can find me here on Lessons Learned on Twitch. Not Twitch, not yet. And if you like this or any video on my channel, please comment and subscribe. And we'll see you when we see you. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.